Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Obscurama. This episode I will be looking at the film Hausu or Hausu, directed by Nobuhiko Ôbayashi. And this isn't working. It doesn't look anything like Sam. Where's his chest hair? You can't. Jesus Christ! What did I tell you? Chest hair. Sam isn't here, and the reason for that is because he has been the real Sam kidnapped by international terrorists. And we have received their ransom letter, but they're only offering us $1 million to take him back, and we need far more than that. So, unfortunately, until Sam returns on the silver screen, you're stuck with me and Tom. Jesus, Tom, help me, Tom. We need 2 chairs. So sorry, pretend Sam. Oh God, I have notes. We're still going to be talking about the film. It's all going to be okay. Michael, I hope now you're tracking. Was this just on my groin? Well, welcome to episode 7 of Obscurama. My name is Lawrie Brewster, and I am an experienced and mostly competent horror filmmaker, as is my good friend Tom Staunton. And today we're going to be talking about a wonderful Japanese horror film called Hausu, directed by Nobuhiko Ôbayashi. So, Tom, what did you think of Hausu?
I really liked it. I wasn't sure about it when I first watched it. I thought it was kind of a bit crazy and all over the place stylistically, but as the film progressed, I thought it was fantastic.
It was so surreal. It's such an overwhelming visual overload that you just don't know what the hell to make of it. And there's some folks that will think that Hausu is not for them. But I've got to say, there is something special that lingers with you watching that film. Researching into more of its past as well, we can get a greater appreciation of what makes this film so remarkable and special. So this might come as a surprise to you, but originally, Nobuhiko Ôbayashi was commissioned to produce for Toho their own version of Jaws. Jaws was a huge success in Japan, and Toho, which you will know from all the Godzilla movies, wanted to hit the ground running with their own monstrous hit. Nobuhiko ends up pitching them an idea for a horror film, which to me sounds nothing like a Godzilla film.
No.
But apparently they loved it so much that they greenlit the project within 3 hours. Yeah, which is great, but with one small caveat, which was that Nobuhiko Ôbayashi was not allowed to direct it because he wasn't a contract player with Toho. You can imagine as a filmmaker having your dreams presented and dashed within a very short time period.
Yeah, it's gut-wrenching. Your whole idea, and then suddenly, now we don't want you to make it. That's horrifying.
As a filmmaker, it's probably not an unfamiliar experience.
Probably not.
In fact, as a single man in Scotland, it's probably also not an unfamiliar experience. Yes.
I don't know what to say to that.
It's okay, Tom. Because this is the real subject of tonight's episode of Obscurama, Tom's love life.
Yeah.
What I discovered was that Nobuhiko Ôbayashi would spend the next 2 years effectively trying to lobby Toho into letting him direct the film. But the way he did this was completely remarkable. He would go outside of Toho Studios and stand on the street. And I know what you're thinking, but it's not that. that he
Yeah.
did. He would have his business cards printed with graphics for Hausu, and he would effectively give them to complete strangers whilst extolling the virtues of his new project. Funnily enough, over time, this actually worked. Artists from across Japan and even the public were getting more and more interested in this bizarre take on a haunted house story with a haunted cat. Within those 2 years, Nobuhiko Ôbayashi manages to get a film soundtrack produced with a kind of fusion jazz electronic rock band,
So he did the soundtrack before the film.
and it was released. A novelization, so you could buy the book, a full radio play that was performed,
Wow.
and
Okay.
and basically everything.
He did everything but make the film.
Yeah, and the other thing he did was a manga. You could actually get a full manga of this. And during the same 2 years, he also somehow found the time to direct over 200 commercials,
Wow.
every one of them starring Charles Bronson.
What? No, that's not true.
Yes, Tom.
It's not true.
Tom.
I don't think that's true.
It's true.
I don't think so. I can see that look in your eye.
So, yeah, some of them.
Some of them.
Yeah, in fact, we might even have a cutaway to an advert. Or not, in which case you're just still awkwardly looking at us.
Oh
yeah,
well.
Yeah.
Spoon 一杯何カラット
He was also meeting a lot of the folks that would collaborate with him on the making of the film, including the
actresses.
the delicious young ladies, as you called them, that would
No, I
feature in the
Cut that straight away.
So many of the collaborators came from the world of commercials, and this aesthetic as well that he would bring to TV advertising as well would present itself in the film. But it's something that had originated beforehand with his own short films. And funnily enough, those short films were the things that also did get him original attention from Toho, which makes their decision not to just hire him as a contract director all the more weird.
Yeah.
There's 2 fantastic short films that I would suggest you check out, and they are called Complex, produced in 1964, and Emotion in 1966. And both of these short films would feature many of the trademark styles of the director, including quick and quirky editing, peculiar juxtapositions really, of dark visuals with extremely cheerful music, and casts made of predominantly female characters that espouse something of, shall we say, the naivety of youth.
It actually makes a lot more sense now that you've told me he's a commercial director, because some of them feel like mini commercials. I mean, he's not selling anything, but they just feel, they look and are edited like 1970s commercials.
He's selling art, Tom.
Yeah.
A dream of a better future for mankind.
Isn't that what we all want?
Yeah. As we know, advertising has got more and more sophisticated. And where does it get its inspirations from? Because most TV commercials, sometimes the most effective ones, are hardly drawing their inspiration from classical narrative cinema, but are from art house cinema. And one of the challenges for studios as well is to identify that talent, that is the shit hot new talent that's got a new way of depicting things visually. And I guess with Nobuhiko Ôbayashi,
I love saying that name.
I'm proud every time I pronounce it correctly.
That's no mean feat.
Yeah, it's being Scottish. We're only used to pronouncing things like, I don't know, like battered haggis.
Malcolm Cameron or Cameron Malcolm.
Yep, and deep fried Mars bars. And coddle.
Coddle, yeah.
Recently, Tom was the subject of an internet controversy and was almost cancelled because of his production of a dish native to his Emerald Isle called coddle.
Yeah, specifically Dublin, let's be honest.
It consists of sweetmeats made from the boiled penises of piglets.
That's what that looks like, but I promise you it's nothing like that. It's delicious. It's a very nourishing, hearty, watery stew for shriveled penises.
Well, they're, full of hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had some yesterday, which is why I feel great today.
It was rather disgusting, though, the way you played with your food. Okay, we'll move on from that.
Good. Thank you.
So, apart from casting 7 beautiful girls from the world of modelling that had been in many of the adverts, in fact, all of them had been in the adverts that Nobuhiko Ôbayashi had directed, they were mostly inexperienced. In fact, inexperienced to the point where many of them had never done any acting before. Except for one actress, though, in particular, and I must check my notes to pronounce her name correctly. She plays the role of a mysterious aunt who is the owner of the haunted house. She was played by Yoko Minamida and is a beautiful woman, gorgeous actress, and a veteran actress at that, who had already featured in over 40 films. Anyway, she's absolutely fantastic. And her experience in performance as a veteran actress does, I think, provide an anchor compared to the inexperience of the younger actresses.
Yeah.
So, Tom, you're probably wondering, aren't you, how did House perform in the Japanese domestic box office in 1977 on July 30th when it was released?
I can't wait for you to tell me.
Well, good news is that it performed pretty much spectacularly in a commercial sense. And it played at a time when Toho itself was suffering big time from the declining popularity of its own monster movies, the kaiju movies.
Why were they declining?
I think it was just because of the growth of TV during the 70s, and the declining cinema attendance as well meant there was, less money to be gained from cinema, and then that impacted the budgets.
Right.
However, on its release, it became, among critics, the most derided major film of all time, with many critics comparing it to something that symbolised the end of the golden era of Japanese cinema, of the type of films that were made by Akira Kurosawa and classic, almost operatic narrative fiction. Here was this kid with his funky, probably the equivalent being MTV kind of music video style, denigrating these epic tales that fostered cultural pride and historical relevance. We'll look into later is ironic because Nobuhiko Ôbayashi was actually dealing a lot with very serious historical themes and ideas with his own film, despite its youthful and exuberant aesthetic.
Yeah, so he would have grown up around World War II.
Exactly. In the meantime, though, internationally, the film would find favourable responses from critics who would appreciate the unique qualities and wouldn't base their reviews in so much of a comparison over the respectable Japanese cinema. It wouldn't take long until the film found cult status, and to be honest, is something it enjoys today.
Yeah, it's just so totally mad that I'm not surprised it's referred to as a cult film, even though it should definitely be, there's nothing wrong with, cult films don't necessarily need to be lofty, but...
No, absolutely not.
But it makes sense that it would be regarded as a cult film.
So you're perhaps wondering then what the synopsis is. Well...
This should be good.
Yeah, it's like the synopsis doesn't really help. I mean, this is a film that has to be experienced rather than understood. But let's give a pretense that there is a synopsis that one can actually provide for this film. The film is set just prior to the summer holidays, and we follow a character called Gorgeous, who is a gorgeous character. In fact, her friends will all have names that feature their defining characteristics. Let me give you their names, for example. So we have Gorgeous, Melody, who likes to play music, Sweet, who is, very sweet, Mac, who eats a lot, and if you're wondering what Mac means, it's short for Stomach. Kung Fu, who is literally a Kung Fu ninja type lady. Prof, who is the nerdy girl. Fantasy, who likes believing in childish and cute fantasies. So these friends are about to enjoy their summer holidays, but Gorgeous returns home only to discover that her widowed father has returned from Europe with a new girlfriend, a bride-to-be, a fiancée. Suffice to say, Gorgeous doesn't take this news well, and heartbroken, she rushes off to her bedroom to write a letter to her aunt. Now, This aunt is her mother's sister and is someone that she hasn't spoken to for
10 years or something like that, roughly.
Totally. And the aunt seems to be excited to receive her letter and invites Gorgeous to come and stay with her over the summer. Gorgeous doesn't go alone. She is accompanied by her friends, and so the gang of 7, along with a mysterious pet cat, end up at the mansion, the spooky mansion, to meet the aunt. Now, when they arrive, this is where all hell breaks loose. One by one, these 7 girls are going to succumb to the spirits of the house. There is some complexity, some metaphysical and metaphorical qualities to these spirits that make them more than just your average ghost or demonic possession. The aunt is herself a ghost. I guess you could say the supernatural overlord of the house. She is the ghost of someone who spent years and years of their life waiting for the return of her fiancé who served during the Second World War. Of course, this husband never returns and she dies of a broken heart. Her spirit lingers behind in the house and consumes young women whom she considers naive to the trials and tribulations that her generation experienced during and after the war.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
Yeah.
The ghost is quite bitter, it seems. And that's a really interesting thing for a ghost to have, to be bitter, I suppose.
Eventually, the aunt possesses Gorgeous, and you can see a kind of marriage between the bitterness Gorgeous has, the marriage of her father, the heartbroken aunt as well. A word, Tom. A word on acting. What characters were your favourite? What performances did you like the most?
I liked the aunt. She was fantastic. I thought the watermelon seller quite hilarious as well, and almost ridiculous.
Oh, the watermelon seller. Right, so there's a guy that sells watermelons outside the mansion, and it's completely over the top and hilarious.
Yeah. I also liked, I mean, they were actually all fine. It was a kind of a heightened form of acting, really, from them. I think apparently he got them, they were kind of stilted or kind of stiff with their acting, and he used to, I think he played music to kind of get them motivated.
He almost intentionally tries to maintain an artificial, weird kind of mood that would prevent a naturalistic performance.
Yeah.
For example, right, he would run out from behind the camera before takes and just start like dancing with the actors, you know?
That makes so much sense.
And like just singing songs to them and like totally being wacky, you know? And I mean like, and if you don't come from any acting experience and you're just getting confronted with this fun, zany behaviour, you're not going to take it as seriously, the role.
No.
Although they do a good job for what it's worth. There's a childlike exuberance that he was trying to encourage with them, and he just didn't want folks playing it too real, at least not the characters of the schoolgirls anyway.
Yeah, even when they were being consumed by the house, there were kind of a playfulness about them. Even when Melody was losing her fingers to the piano, she just starts laughing. And it's just like, why?
Exactly. Yeah, there is a kind of almost like a slightly meta quality where whilst they're sometimes perishing, the girls will comment on their own demises in ironic, comical fashion.
Yeah.
The scene where the character Melody is consumed by the piano is one of the hallmark scenes in the film. But incidentally, the demises of those characters were in fact invented by Nobuhiko Ôbayashi's 10-year-old daughter.
Yeah, I heard that.
So she would come up with all these crazy ideas of what she thought were scary. So the idea, for example, of that she had was a fear of having her fingers trapped between the piano keys.
Yeah, that's such a strange, specific fear.
Or her bed coming to life.
Yeah.
A head coming out of a well. I mean, that's pretty grisly, to be honest. We should hire her for our movies, yeah.
It's pretty horrendous.
You mentioned the actor that played the watermelon seller. Issei Kobayashi is his name. And Issei Kobayashi, no relation to Nobuhiko Ôbayashi, but it's actually a big deal in the Japanese music world. He's like, I don't know, he's head of like 1 million musical organizations in Japan, and he was originally hired to produce the soundtrack to the film. but he was too busy or something like that. And he recommended a friend of his who had a band, who we'll get to them in a moment, but he still wanted to be in the film. And it seems that he was enough of a big deal that by him being in the film, it would still be helpful, and for the sake of promotion in the trailer, him saying "house" would actually be really useful. And so, yeah, it's apparently quite important.
It's like having, I don't know, Bono in your film.
He is absolutely hilarious in the film as well. So is the guy that plays the teacher to the schoolgirls as well.
Mr.
Kobe or Kogi?
Proto?
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
Basically, he is supposed to be accompanying the girls as their guardian, supervisor, or something like that. But he is delayed, he misses the train, and every time we see the girls succumbing to the house, we cut to him on his way, supposedly to rescue them. There's a real slapstick quality to the film, and especially with this character of the teacher, this incompetent guy who's always missing trains, he's falling over. And sometimes the film accentuates that comedy by fast forwarding things as well, so he'll be kind of going like really fast. And then he eventually turns into, well, a giant pile of bananas. The girl that plays Gorgeous as well, and apologies for forgetting her name, but it will appear on the screen. Of the 7 girls, she is the only one that has some acting experience, not a lot.
Yeah.
But she's quite tremendous in it.
Yeah, she's very good.
The character she plays is the one that you might infer the idea of the film having a coming-of-age quality, of a transition into adulthood. And we see that with her the most, especially at the end when she has been effectively possessed by the aunt. She almost presents that maturity.
Yeah, she's very kind of stoic, and she definitely becomes an adult.
Also, she appears as a phantom, as a ghost, and she's quite striking. The makeup, you really throws herself
Isn't
in
she
it.
in kind of geisha makeup for a part?
No, I think it is like a geisha.
Yeah.
And that's the Scottish pronunciation. Geisha.
Apologies.
Yeah. The Celtic lands do love Japan, but our ability to pronounce words outside of our own culinary inventions is quite limited, unfortunately. But she looks fantastic. Also, the cat as well. I can't remember the cat's name. It's got a name like Snowy or...
Begins with M, doesn't it? I can't remember.
Oh yeah, Marcellus.
Why not? Let's go with that.
The cat holds an important aspect to Japanese culture, and funnily enough has occupied many Japanese ghost stories as well. I think it's 1958 there was a Japanese horror film, Ghost in the Cat Ghost Mansion, or The Cat in the Mansion. The cat is very poignant in the film. We see this demonic cat many times, and sometimes the visual representations of it as well, in terms of artwork of the cat that comes to life suddenly. And
the green eyes.
Totally,
Yeah.
and
Actually,
watery blood's exploding from its mouth as well.
That iconic poster with the cat.
Great, isn't it? It's one of the best iconic minimalist arts, for a horror film. What did you think of the cinematography and the visual effects and the special effects?
I was annoyed at the start because I was like, oh, what is this? Like, because it's a lot of, it's pretty much almost all matte paintings in the background. Everything's kind of very studio based, like stylized. They're not trying to make it look realistic in any way, shape or form. And then as it kind of went along, I was like, oh, this is actually really nice. I really like this, especially the house itself and the outside, the well and all that. I thought it was like beautiful backdrops. They did an amazing job with the matte paintings. Is that what they're called, matte paintings? Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, these matte paintings are not like the kind of matte paintings you would expect. In terms of blending in with the backgrounds, they're very consciously standing out so that you look at them and you're thinking, well, this is very much a painting.
Yeah.
And they would be hyper-realized as well,
Yeah.
like really brightly coloured and strong, bold visuals.
Yeah, I thought obviously The blocking was fantastic. Everybody was staged very nicely in the house. And the cinematography was fantastic, extremely colourful.
You know, I've actually been detoxing from coffee or normal caffeine for 12 weeks, but Tom has made me a diluted, caffeinated version of coffee today.
It's like when you give your child a kind of a sip of beer or something for the first time.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Like diluted wine.
Okay, are you ready for these notes? This is going to blow you away.
Hit me.
The sacred text. There is a whole pile of special effects, which on first glance might not seem like very special effects. They might seem like very crude effects. The kind of effects we're talking about are not very well executed blue screen, weird transitions where one frame is blended with another frame, crazy graphics as well that are thrown at the screen, so like sparks and things like that. We'll also have really unexpected slow motion sequences that just suddenly come in.
Yeah.
And those are actually, I think, quite beautiful, but they're totally unconventional. For example, when we meet Gorgeous's new stepmother,
Oh yeah.
and she's introduced, and she just comes out with like,
It's like a milk tray ad or something.
exactly, like a milk tray ad, which there's like a wind machine blowing on her, like she's got a scarf. It looks like some kind of beauty from a 1940s film. And it's so surreal and not meant to be in any way real.
Yeah.
But it is because you're watching it.
誰その人男女
君出てきてくれないか。
Toho Studios, despite the financial trouble it was in, still had the country's best special effects artists, and they were saying to Nobuhiko Ôbayashi, you know, they're here, use them. You know, we're funding this movie. But he was like, nope, no, I'm going to do all the effects myself.
Wow.
And they're like, what? You know, so there he is with his, you know, paper and scissors and just creating all these really crude effects. And Toho must have really been shitting their pants, thinking like, this was originally commissioned to be our big budget rival to Jaws, the monster movie. And this guy is like literally locked himself in a room and is making his own special effects.
I don't know how he wasn't stopped halfway through production and just told, you're not doing it the way we wanted.
There was a stage in the production where Toho executives said that they had, and I can't quote them exactly, unfortunately that isn't in my notes, but effectively they said, we have tried producing comprehensible films and have failed so far. We feel that House is incomprehensible, but because of that, we're willing to give it a chance. And it's very rare for studio executives to take that mindset. Could you imagine? Like Disney being presented with a script that was incomprehensible and thinking, you know what, let's go for that.
This was the 70s, man.
Yeah, New Hollywood era.
Yeah.
Obviously that worked for Toho, but the question is, why did the director want to make his effects look worse and look so obviously fake? Well, there is a couple of reasons, and one of them is he was in fact continuing a visual style that he had already established in his own past films and commercials as well. He knew that they had worked for him. They'd worked for his art house short films and the TV ads. And why change that now? If they'd been successful to that point, then in this feature film, it could blow up, which of course it did. But there was an artistic consideration as well. And I can quote Nobuhiko Ôbayashi when I say this.
I think we should have like an audience clap every time you say his name. I think it should be.
I have really bad name memory.
I know.
Hi, Tom. So this is his quote. My favourite director in the world is Lawrie Brewster, and you can purchase his products at hexmedia.co. Okay. No. Adults only think about things they understand. Everything stays on that boring human level, while children can come up with things that can't be explained. In this respect, we can get an idea of why he consulted so heavily with his 10-year-old daughter, but also it gives us an idea of why the aesthetic has an intentional childlike quality. It's trying to create a reality that is from a child perspective, I guess. Which, to be honest, I think it accomplishes.
Yeah.
And many Japanese filmmakers have cited Hausu as an inspiration for them as well to get into cinema. For Western audiences, they'll be introduced to Hausu. Have you ever seen Hausu? And I can imagine their faces screwing up in the first 5-10 minutes, and then eventually appreciating it or liking it, perhaps not liking it at all, but I think most folks are kind of won over.
Yeah.
But the added context, though, of this information really does help to appreciate that there is something finer going on than it just being, as some Western pundits or critics would describe as just wacky Japanese cinema. So we also have to talk about the eclectic, fusion, electronic, rock-inspired soundtrack that was produced and completed and released before the film itself.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to tell me what you thought of the soundtrack whilst I reach down for my coffee.
I thought it was good. I was a bit annoyed by it. That's going to be a running theme with me. You know, sometimes I really love this film, but you know, every now and again it did something grating that I didn't really enjoy. But I suppose that's probably.
I mean, you feel that way about Enya.
I actually like Enya, but anyway.
If you thought the coddle dish that we mentioned before with the piglet penises was bad, I think admitting your fandom to Enya is...
I think one of her albums is quite good, actually. But anyway, that's another story for another day. I thought it's batshit crazy, the music. It's all over the place. It's weird and wonderful. Totally eclectic, as you said. There's the transitions and changes completely throughout the film. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I absolutely love the soundtrack. It is completely crazy, from high-paced electronic, kind of energetic music to these unbelievably melodramatic but quite evocative piano romantic pieces as well. It is all over the place, but it does inspire strong feelings. As we mentioned before, the water cellar, or the watermelon cellar should I say, was originally supposed to produce the soundtrack. I say Kobayashi. And he couldn't do it, so he recommended another guy called Miki Yoshino. Miki Yoshino would arrange the music, for example, like with the piano pieces and stuff like that. But there was also his band as well that would contribute to the soundtrack, and that band was called Godigo, which is actually still going today.
Wow.
And Miki is he's still like front man running it.
Wow. Okay. Nice one.
One of the funniest things is the website, I think it's called Discograph, that has like all the soundtracks.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's kind of like an IMDb for soundtracks and music albums, and just seeing the number of genres that this soundtrack is categorized as. It's categorized as soundtrack, blues, jazz, electronic, rock, and fusion.
Yeah.
And as you'll know, I'm something of a fan of fusion jazz.
Can you name a fusion jazz band?
Can you name a fusion jazz band?
Well, the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Are they jazz fusion?
John Hughes. Yeah.
Wow. Well done.
Yeah.
I can't name any.
No, because you're rubbish! Right, anyway, you're not rubbish. Tom actually knows a shit ton more about music than I do, which is why he teased me with that probing question. But on the subject of fusion jazz.
Yeah, I was...
Damn. Okay, we'll move on to themes now. Not musical themes, but themes. Nobuhiko Ôbayashi. Nobuhiko Ôbayashi.
Can you imagine if you got his name wrong for every single take? Can you imagine if that was incorrect?
There is going to be some kind of hipster shitbag commenting on this video that will tell me precisely how I am mispronouncing Nobuhiko Kobayashi's name. They might emphasize the pause I'm putting between Nobuhiko Kobayashi, but that's just to help me because the parlance of the language is very different to our Scottish tongue. So, would you like to chat about the metaphorical themes in House?
Sure, why not?
So I've done some research, I have my notes. They're derived from my own mighty intellect as well as the intellects of others. It may be somewhat surprising to some of you that the themes that we've identified within the film are actually quite serious. They relate to war and grief, especially for a film that at first glance is aesthetically cheerful, visually over the top, and it would seem that this is the intention of the director. The naivety of youth, the innocence of youth is represented in their world, even with the matte paintings of cities behind them that appear like almost like theme parks. They're so colourful and bright. Everything is filled with joy until they reach the aunt's house, and she represents adulthood, grief, and the losses incurred by generation through their experiences of the Second World War. The house is covered in cobwebs, the colour are brown and black, they're all very different from the kind of primary coloured, hyper-realised visuals of the children. We also have the aunt, who we've discussed as a representation of grief from a woman whose husband didn't return from the war. She died, and her bitterness has taken on a supernatural form. Now, here's an interesting thing from the notes I took, that the director, Nobuhiko Ôbayashi, can relate more closely to the aunts
Yes.
than the children. Tragically, Nobuhiko Ôbayashi, as a schoolboy, was himself very nearly the victim of the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It appears, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, that he narrowly survived by not being in the city at the time, but that all his school friends were, and that they in fact all perished.
Yeah, that's kind of horrible. That is horrible.
He was raised in a generation that experienced the military indoctrination of the imperial government that was on a war footing. But he was too young to be physically able to contribute to the war effort, and in that sense powerless to, in his mind, fight or prevent the tragedy of losing his friends and many others. And even the trauma of the bombings that would have devastated his country as well. Ironically though, the military indoctrination of the time would have inspired idealism. It would have presented a golden future that they were fighting for. Nobuhiko Kobayashi survives the war, and his childhood is devastated by that experience from one ideal into a forced adulthood. He was forced to grow up very quickly, as would the whole generation of young Japanese people affected by the war, as well as all that generation around the world affected by the war. And there is a bitterness in that experience, and he paints this juxtaposition strongly between the aunt that I think personifies his experience and the teenage schoolgirls that typify his experience before that cataclysm in the war, but may also provide a critique of young people in contemporary society that grew up without the trauma of the war.
Yeah.
And perhaps there is a kind of a resentment at their naivety.
Yeah, that's something that happens in a lot of Japanese movies, kind of like the loss of innocence and the breaking of naivety.
Yeah, it's true. In many respects then, you could almost say that House is a little like a coming-of-age film
Yeah.
for these kids, because the schoolgirls don't just die, they live on as spirits that end up populating the same spiritual world as the aunt. So they're kind of in this kind of miasma of bitterness, you could say. They're going to now feed on the future kids that arrive. But are they doing that because they become adults? Does their bitterness draw from youth?
Does he
feed on that, you know, with resentment?
Does he consider that a tragedy, the fact that they've all become bitter and lost their innocence? Or is he glad that they... Do you know what I mean?
I think because he is approaching the subject from the perspective of a child and he invited his daughter to do that, I feel that he will see probably that there is something sacred about child innocence and youthful innocence.
Yeah.
I think he would see the bitterness as resulting from the betrayal of youth. So he would have seen himself as a victim of that as well because of the decisions made by the government and the military commanders during the war.
Yeah.
It does lament a kind of lost youth.
Yeah.
I also think that House isn't just specifically tying in the war. I think it's talking in as well in more general terms about adulthood as well. For example, there's unexpected nudity and sexualization of the characters as well that isn't in any way, in my mind, pornographic or anything like that. Not like that. It's not that kind of movie. It's not a pink film, as they are sometimes known in Japan, which were kind of softcore, pornographic kind of BDSM films produced in the 60s and 70s. I'm sure Tom will be picking one of those for the next episode of Obscurama. But, but in any case, this too can be seen as an example of maturity as well.
Yeah.
These characters that are made to behave in really kind of naive, childish, over-the-top kind of ways, but then they're suffering at the whims of these spirits, metaphorically as they become adults.
Yeah, it kind of makes it more disturbing as well.
Yeah, they're stripped away, eventually, some of them even of their clothes. But then, of course, they'll ironically joke about it as well.
Yeah.
About the fates that they meet in this kind of tongue-in-cheek nod to the transition from sexless, youthful innocence to sexual, embittered adulthood. Are you an embittered sexual being, Tom?
Of course, constantly.
Yeah, especially our audience. They all have very, very many serious sexual problems. Deviants, the whole bunch of you. So those are powerful themes that you would not expect on a surface reading of the film. And if you look at some of the YouTube videos, where it's like a 4-minute video with some guy saying, "Hey man, you have to check House, it's just so wacky." You know, you wouldn't get the idea that it might be a treatise on the traumas of war and the loss of youthful innocence. And that doesn't mean the film's pretentious. Even though the director comes from an art house short film background, he marries it into a pop cultural style that made it a phenomenal and accessible success for predominantly youthful audiences in Japan. It was the kids that drove the film to massive success.
Yeah.
You know, they loved it because this was a film speaking to them. But there is this more adult-like appreciation that can be drawn from it, which has seen Nobuhiko Ôbayashi become appreciated as one of the leading directors of, I guess you could say, cult cinema and even art house cinema in Japan. And it's striking as well that these themes would continue to inform his later projects as well.
He made a lot of anti-war films.
No, good for him. And of course, unfortunately, Nobuhiko Ôbayashi is no longer with us, and we certainly would like to dedicate this video to him, though I'm sure he's received much better, grander dedications to his incredible work. Certainly a talent to be missed. And I would suggest, if you haven't seen House, check it out immediately, and please watch it with an open mind. And do check out his other works as well, especially the short film Emotion as well. A fantastic filmmaker.
I agree.
So, would you recommend House as well, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. It's just be patient with it, and it will surprise you in fantastic ways. It's truly, truly unique and charming.
So guys, thank you so much for watching our episode of Obscurama. Future episodes will consist of me and Tom lamenting our fates as troubled filmmakers and discussing future films, and at times we will also have guest hosts as well. People that are far more mediocre than myself and Tom, just to add some disappointment to your lives. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to hit subscribe and the bell notification icon so you don't miss any of our future videos. Thank you, and bye!
Thank you.
Make sure you don't miss any of our future Hex Presents videos or any of our other crazy shows at Channel Hex by hitting subscribe and the bell notification icon. Also, if you would like to support our channel and help us make more exciting and fun shows, then do support us on Patreon by hitting the link in the description. Thank you guys, and goodbye.